And now it's Deborah Cobelt Live and the Little Italy podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on our Little Italy podcasts and Deborah Cobelt Live. And joining me are my friends, Amy Riolo and Dr. Simon Poole, who wrote the terrific book, Olive Oil for Dummies. And they've written quite a few Dummies books, and they're terrific. They're for anybody. They're for people who are, master chefs, and they're for folks like me who sort of need a Dummies book. But it really breaks down everything about olive oil. I love olive oil. I use it for everything from my hair to my food. We're going to get into all that. Both of you, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's wonderful. Now, let's get started first to talk about what are the different types of olive oils, right, Doctor? You might want to address this one first. We go to the store, you've got olive oil, extra virgin, extra virgin. And then there's different types of ingredients in there. And I'm never quite sure myself, what should I look for? Does it, change depending upon what you are using it for? Why don't you address that for me?
So for sure. So amongst the olive oil category, we have, of course, extra virgin olive oil, which probably most of your listeners and watchers have heard of. And that is really the premium oil. That is the fresh fruit juice of the olive brought to the mill as quickly as possible to make sure it's as fresh as possible. And it's full of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. It has to be a certain standard, both in terms of its chemistry and also in terms of its taste. If it doesn't match those standards, if it doesn't pass those criterias, then it can't be labeled as extra virgin. So if it doesn't have the sensory, the taste, and the chemistry, it has to be shipped off and taken to a refinery and essentially made into just olive oil, which is a processed product, which is actually fairly low on most of the nutrients, apart from the fact that it's a reasonably healthy fat. But it's extra virgin olive oil that really is there with all those important anti-inflammatory and antioxidant compounds that I'm sure we'll get into. I mean, there are other descriptions like light olive oil, which is not meaning that it's light in calories, it's actually light in flavor, and mild is another term and description. But essentially, there's extra virgin and then there's refined olive oil. So those are really the categories, and it's extra virgin olive oil that we will be talking about predominantly tonight, because that's the really great stuff.
I've also seen extra, at least out here, I've seen that. And what does that mean? I mean, do they put it through something really extra special or what?
So that is not a category that would be recognized, and you've got to be very careful actually with olive oil, because there are some things that marketing can do to try to promote an oil to be better than somebody else's. Extra virgin olive oil is a quality standard, but there's no extra virgin oil. And indeed, terms like cold pressed or first pressed really don't mean very much, because it's always pressed at a low temperature. Otherwise, it wouldn't come out being extra virgin olive oil. And it's always done on the first pressing. There's no process these days to take olives or the paste back for a second go. So those kind of expressions as well are actually just really marketing, and partly because people expect them. But essentially, the thing to look out for is extra virgin olive oil.
Amy, let's talk about essential nutrients and, some of the benefits of olive oil and the different uses as well. So, sort of a long question there, but let's start with antioxidant, and, the health benefits.
Well, extra virgin olive oil is really important for the health benefits because it is a quality fat. It's as people are choosing to plan their meals together and they're looking for different micronutrients. So they want to have a low, a protein that's really high in protein but lower in fat. Usually they want to have a good quality fat like extra virgin olive oil, like avocado. And then they also want to have a good quality carbohydrate. So it's important in that sense. But then when you add in the polyphenols, Simon can tell you exactly which ones, and this is kind of his favorite thing to talk about. So he can talk about really in detail which ones, how they work for us, and where they're found in the extra virgin olive oil and the different levels. And then we can talk about its anti-inflammatory effects. This is very important too, and what makes extra virgin olive oil different from other types of oils. You can get a healthful fat, but is it going to have all those different polyphenols and antioxidants? Is it going to have as much of an anti-inflammatory effect? No. So we love extra virgin olive oil for that as kind of a base. You can cook with it, you can fry with it. There have been a lot of talk in the past that you can't fry an extra virgin olive oil, that you shouldn't cook with it. But we actually promote cooking with olive oil because there are actually chemical things that take place that has been studied over certain periods of time and temperatures up to like 400 degrees, where you can actually coax more nutrients out of the food by cooking it in extra virgin olive oil. And in terms of the high phenols, that's very important for a curative standpoint, and to be able to use it not only for its wonderful flavor and tradition, and for the fact that it's a good quality fat, but also you get all of those additional nutrient benefits from it. And so I use it in everything from breakfast to dinner. I use it as a tonic. I use it as something to heal. I use it in the beauty cabinet, and in terms of treating your skin and your hair and things like that, but also as the main fat in whether it's baking or cooking.
Really want to talk about the medicinal purposes. Inflammatory situations are happening everywhere. I'm going to guess it's because of what's in our food, and this is on trend finally in this country, because everyone's talking about the chemicals that are in our foods that my mother always used to talk about and would say, Deborah, do not take that off the shelf. But being a kid who was raised in America where most stuff was processed, I would grab it. And she'd say, no, that's not healthy. Well, as an adult, I do have inflammatory issues. And I'm thinking, well, that's got to be the reason. Because other than that, I'm fairly healthy and very active. How does this help us to reduce inflammation?
There's good news. I'll start off, and then I'll let Simon continue, because I know he has a lot to say on this topic. But one of the things I want to tell people is not to despair. So it's not like if you've done this as a kid, or you've done this up until now, that there's no hope. In 30 days of going into an anti-inflammatory diet, using whole foods and good quality extra virgin olive oil, you can see a difference on a lot of those markers. We had a roundtable discussion at Georgetown University back in May about the gut microbiome and the Mediterranean diet, and they produced all this research saying, look, they had studied actually veterans from the Gulf War who had a lot of high markers of every single ailment that you could think of. And with just 30 days, they studied them again, and they found a lot of these reduced. And it was just about a whole foods diet and extra virgin olive oil. So I want to put that out there that there's hope. And then Simon, I would love for you to take it from here.
Yes, well, science is now beginning to describe certain elements in our lifestyle, including food, which are pro-inflammatory. In other words, they drive chronic low-grade inflammation, and some elements which are anti-inflammatory. And it's this chronic low-grade inflammatory process that we now know contributes to a lot of diseases. We used to think heart disease was actually just because people used to get blocked arteries clogged up with cholesterol, but actually we now understand that it is much more related to chronic inflammation. So
Wow.
it's chronic inflammation that causes many cancers, inflammatory diseases, of course, that we are very familiar with, for example, bowel diseases that are inflammatory based, arthritis, and so on, but also these other conditions like heart disease and stroke and so on. So because most of these conditions are what makes us sick, it's really important to counter the sort of pro-inflammatory elements, which can include simple high levels of sugar in our diet. Lots of saturated fat is pro-inflammatory. And probably there are elements, although the science is just beginning, there are elements in ultra-processed foods which do drive inflammation. And on the other side, we know that oleic acid, the healthy fat in extra virgin olive oil, and also these precious polyphenols, which we're already beginning to mention, have really powerful anti-inflammatory effects. And what is quite extraordinary, and what really I think can give people hope, is that we can show evidence that we can drive down inflammation in a very short period of time. So there were some experiments where they took a number of people, fed them very poor quality diets for 24 hours, 48 hours, poor people. And then they measured what we call biomarkers of inflammation. So that's blood tests which can show levels of inflammation. And then they gave them one meal of sofrito, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is
Yeah.
tomatoes, extra virgin olive oil, and garlic, and so on, full of anti-inflammatory components. And within a matter of 3 or 4 hours, they showed that their biomarkers of inflammation had decreased substantially. So it's important to
Wow.
get these regular doses of anti-inflammatory components into our diet.
Let's talk about polyphenols. For those folks who don't know what that is, can you explain?
Yeah, so sure. So polyphenols are present in quite a lot of plants, extra virgin olive oil, so in the olive, in berries, in dark chocolate, in lots of the fruit and vegetables, particularly those that have color, are often laden with polyphenols. And they're compounds which the plant produces to protect itself from oxygen atoms that are very reactive, or from heat, extreme heat, UV light, radiation. So it's the plant producing these polyphenols to protect itself. And then we can get these polyphenols in foods, and they're particularly rich in extra virgin olive oil. And they often taste slightly bitter as well, because the plant is producing them as protective compounds. So they don't want people to eat, or animals to eat too much of them. And then we can get these in our diet, particularly the bitter and slightly peppery and pungent flavors of polyphenols. And then we can protect ourselves from some of these inflammatory processes that are going on.
Mm. Let's talk about some of the fun ways to use our olive oil. Amy, I'm going to give this one to you because you said earlier you incorporate it into your breakfast. So what are we talking about here? In your cereal, although I don't know if you eat cereal, but tell us, what are some fun ways that you cook, not just cook with it, but eat with it throughout the day?
That's a good question. If I didn't eat so much of it during the day, I would take a shot first thing in the morning of a good quality
Ah,
just as a tonic, but I do cook with it and everything, and so I don't need to. So a lot of times, if I'm having Greek yogurt, I'll put a little bit on the Greek yogurt to help to
oh,
extract. Greek yogurt especially if it's a good quality one, full of probiotics, full of, it's a balanced food, so it has all the three micronutrients in it. It might have inulin in it, which helps to balance out blood sugar levels. It's kind of a great way to start your day. So I'll put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil on that, and maybe dip it with some whole grain bread or something like that in the morning. Maybe a little bit of nuts, a little bit of fruit if I want to be fancy and have a little more time. And then for lunch, of course, it's always, I usually have pasta for lunch. I don't have a sandwich or something like that. So it's always starting out with extra virgin olive oil or a salad, again, with extra virgin olive oil. When I plan my meals, I try to plan them around produce. So I think about what three, if I can, pieces of fresh produce am I going to get in that meal? And then I start around that. So adding extra virgin olive oil with that is really nice. Maybe it's a soup, but you started as the extra
mm,
virgin base, even the risotto. So in the book, I have a delicious carrot and cardamom risotto with burrata. But I
yeah.
start the risotto with extra virgin olive oil. A lot of, traditionally it was done with butter, and a lot of people think you can only do it with butter. And I even did for many, many years, but it actually tastes great with extra virgin olive oil. Plus, you get that benefit. So that's a thing. And same thing with dinner. Simon mentioned the sofrito in the Spanish cooking and Italian cooking. It's a different spelling, but usually in most Mediterranean cultures, you're starting out by cooking some vegetables, onion, celery, and carrot, which we call the Trinity also, the French call it mirepoix, or, garlic and chili peppers or something cooking in olive oil. And these things really, really help to supercharge that anti-inflammatory benefit. And then if you're using other vegetables or legumes that have those qualities as well, or fish, seafood is very good for inflammation. It really, really helps. So it tastes good. And, a lot of, for me personally, what I personally eat, I'm not reinventing the wheel on a daily basis. I'm eating traditional Mediterranean foods, whether it's Italian or Spanish or Lebanese or Moroccan or Egyptian. It's always coming from that. And those recipes, just out of the way that they were born naturally, tend to do that. Spaghetti e aglio e olio with the garlic and the olive oil and the peperoncino that
Hmm.
helps to, cut down on the effect of the carbs on your body, but also increase the anti-inflammatory effect. A lot of these combinations that people just do because that's what their grandmother did, they're
Right.
already incorporating science for us.
Let's talk about olive oils from different nations. Amy, you and I are Italian, so I love my Italian olive oil. But is there a difference in the olive? There must be, right? Although much of the olives, they come from more of a Mediterranean climate. But could either of you just sort of talk about the differences between the olives and the olive oils?
Sure. So there
I'm
are
very
some
happy
olives,
to
there are some olives that are
carry
only
on, Amy.
made table olives, and then there are some that can be used as table olives and olive oil olives. They all start out green, and the more you let them mature, the darker they get until they get to black. But some are eaten and pressed at different colors. Some are eaten and pressed in green, some are eaten and pressed in brown, some are green with black spots, and some are black when they're pressed. It just depends on the type of olive. But you think of like a Castelvetrano is always a green. It's always in the bottle green, and then the Kalamata is always black. And that's just because that's when they taste best. But there are over 1,000 different cultivars of olives in the world. Italy has the largest amount of biodiversity in terms of grapes and olives. So we have a lot of different types compared to other countries. Spain is the #1 producer. But like I always tell people, olives are like people. They're good and bad from all places. It just depends upon how they're raised and how they're treated, is that's how they'll turn out. So you could have a really great olive oil or olive from Morocco, which isn't known on the international market, and you could have really bad ones from Italy because they were treated poorly. It's not that Italian are better, Moroccan or Spanish, they're all equal. They all have wonderful things, but it really depends on their environment. So like a lot of the cultivars might have originated in Spain or in Italy, but now they're producing them. And Simon made sure that in the book, we mentioned them in their now countries where they found. So California, most of the cultivars that are being produced there were originally from Spain or Italy. Same thing in Australia or in Latin America. And then there are different cultivars that are indigenous to different places. So even in Italy, some cultivars wouldn't be had everywhere. So like my label, olive oil, that is produced from Tenute Cristiano in Calabria, is made from the Carolea olive, which I put down here. And that Carolea you can't get in Umbria or Lazio or Tuscany. It only is one of the indigenous ones to Calabria. But they have different flavor profiles, cultivar by cultivar. Then they have different flavor profiles depending upon where they were grown and different polyphenol levels. So this Carolea in this year's harvest in Calabria would be different if you produced it 15 miles away. And Simon can share much more.
Simon, please add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, absolutely right, spot on, Amy. And the story of the olive tree is just such a beautiful and romantic story, because it's traveled the world. So from its origins, where we first, humankind first cultivated it in Iran and Syria and the Levant, the Phoenicians taking the olive tree with them across the Mediterranean to colonize and to explore Italy and Spain and North Africa. And at one point, North Africa was providing most of the olive oil for the Roman Empire. So there's the story of the evolution of the tree, and then of course with the new arrivals into the Americas, as Amy said, bringing olives, the Spanish bringing olives to America, South America, Chile, Peru, where they first actually brought it, to California, and now even in the last sort of 50 years to Australia. And because it's got such a great sustainability credibility in terms of its sustainability, actually it's a great crop for the planet. And so more and more people are recognizing that not only is it really healthy, but more countries want to explore. And even India and China are now exploring the possibility. There's some challenges with the climate, but there are olive groves now appearing in many parts of the northern and southern hemisphere where there's a sort of Mediterranean type of climate. So it's a wonderful story of this migration, of this evolution of the tree.
How about here in California, where we have a Mediterranean type climate?
You have some great extra virgin olive oils coming out of California now, and I've tasted very many of them, and there's a real commitment, I think, amongst Californian growers to really get high quality extra virgin olive oil. So it's great. So you can in the States access oils from the Mediterranean, from South America, and from of course from California, Texas, Florida as well. So it's a great opportunity.
Here's a personal one for you. Sometimes when I'm at a restaurant, it's usually a very fine restaurant, I will, pour my olive oil and perhaps dip a little bread into it or something. And all of a sudden, quickly it happens, my throat will close up. And it's not all the time. It's only certain times. What's happening? Is there any way either of you could figure that one out? And when it happens, it scares me a little bit because it truly starts to shut down, and I'm like, oh no, and I suddenly can't breathe. What kind of, obviously an allergic reaction, but what is it I'm having an allergic reaction to?
So actually, if I can take that, so it's not strictly speaking an allergic reaction. What it
Ah,
is it's a sense of that pungency, which is causing some irritation on the throat. The good news is that you won't come to harm from it. In
okay.
fact, the irony of it is that I too am very sensitive. So sometimes
Ah.
I even start talking in a slightly squeaky voice, which is very embarrassing when I'm at shows tasting people's olive oil. But what that indicates actually is a very healthy oil. And
Oh.
usually that pungency and that the bitterness, but also this pungency that catches you on your throat, that will soften as you add it to food. But that's one particular polyphenol that's actually causing that. And that's got very powerful anti-inflammatory effects. So we do always say, and we sort of say in the book, we say go for an oil which is fruity and really harmonious in flavor, but also one which has got a little bit of of bitterness, but also some of this pungency that you're describing. Some people prefer softer oils because unless they put a robust oil like that on a piece of meat, it can create that effect. But you know, it's not a harmful effect. And in fact, the story about how that was particular polyphenol was discovered is fascinating because there was a research scientist from the Monell Institute in Philadelphia who was researching ibuprofen, which in its liquid form causes people to cough. And after discovering that it was the ibuprofen that was causing people to cough in a particular medicine, he went over to Sicily and tasted one of these really robust oils and thought, there's something similar going on. And it turns out that there's a compound called oleocanthal, which is one of the polyphenols, which has very similar properties to ibuprofen, and so
Hmm.
provides some of that anti-inflammatory element that we were talking about earlier.
Wonderful. Um, Amy, you are of Italian descent. Talk to me a little bit about growing up and cooking and what you learned about, different olive oils and how it was a big part of you just being an Italian.
That's a great question. Never know whatever he talks about that, but it's true. You know, it really is part of life, and it kind of accompanies you through life, not only in the kitchen. So if someone had an earache, they would, and I'm not advising this for any of the viewers, it's just what we did. Here's my disclaimer right now. If someone had an earache, you know, you would put a little bit of olive oil on a Q-tip, and that would cure the earache. If somebody
Wow.
had any kind of ailment, kind of like a respiratory problem, we would put olive oil in the pan with a lot of onions and kind of caramelize these onions and then have them eat those. And there are reasons, now there are reasons we can say that the onions, take the waste material out of your cells and that the olive oil helps and it's anti-inflammatory and all of these reasons. But then we didn't know. So it was just kind of, it was original to accompany life. Even, I don't know, if you've ever heard about the evil eye, but this concept of the evil eye and people, if someone, wanted to wish evil on you, that this would be like a curse that might manifest itself in a headache or in different physical ailments. So there were ladies who boiled the oil every time somebody had a case of the malocchio or the evil eye. When babies were born, there was the old tradition. They used to put olive oil in their palm, and then they would put at that time the lira in it. Now we don't. Now there's the euro. They don't use the lira anymore, and this is a monetary unit. But there was money and olive oil in their hand, so that they would be fruitful, so that they would have a good life, so that they would be beautiful, and also they would be prosperous and healthy. And this was just a way. So there are a lot of different folk lore, folk remedies around olive oil. The beautiful poetry written about olive oil during the olive harvest and things like that. And then for
Hmm.
cooking, it was just always something that we had. And at that time, and maybe growing up where I grew up in America, it was different than other people. Other people were cooking with Crisco and with butter or margarine at the time, the 70s, when I was growing up, and we were using olive oil. So it was kind of, you knew that it was something distinct, but it was just something that was part of it. And then there are recipes that were made to celebrate the olive oil, like olive oil cookies, that I have in my book, these tarali. Tomorrow is the feast of Santa Lucia. So the rest, it's already on my blog, but the recipes that I'll post are called Occhi di Santa Lucia, or Santa Lucia's eyes, which are basically made with equal parts olive oil and white wine, and sugar. And it was just olive oil was synonymous with stability, safety. You'll be okay if you have that big container of olive oil in your home. It's a staple. And so I think it was very similar no matter where you grew up. If you grew up as an Italian or a Greek or a Spanish person or someone from North Africa at that time, this is how it would be accompanying.
You were bringing me back to my childhood because you said Crisco, you said margarine. We did not use that in my house, but my best friend and her family, I'd go over there like, oh, they would put ketchup on spaghetti, that kind of thing. And every time I would go there, my mother would say, "Please don't eat over there." I'm not kidding. She was all in with the way she taught and cooked because of her, being raised Italian. Her family's from Italy. And she didn't want me to eat over there. She didn't want me to consume anything with Crisco or margarine, or certainly not ketchup on spaghetti. Could you imagine? And I used to say, "Oh, Mom, stop!" But they knew, and they knew the medicinal properties, especially when they were boiling that. Right? They may not have been able to write it down succinctly the way you both have in books, but they knew. The same way that they knew how to, build these buildings 3,000 years ago, right? They just knew. Simon, you're nodding. What do you want to? I know. What do you want to add to this?
I mean,
please?
I think it's fascinating. I mean, there are so many things that I could pick up on, but I mean, one thing is that the intuitive knowledge that Amy was describing dates back exactly, as you say, thousands of years. And Hippocrates was talking about olive oil in his recipes. A physician called Dioscorides around in
Yes.
ancient Roman times was talking about the earliest, bitterest harvested olive oil for fevers. So, these although they didn't do randomized controlled modern scientific studies, there was some intuition and some intuitive knowledge about the medicinal effects of olive oil. And another thing I was going to go on and say is it's fascinating. I always love talking to people with Italian or Mediterranean heritage because extra virgin olive oil is so much part of your lives.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult sometimes for us to conceive. I grew up in a small country called Wales, just next to England. And, we didn't know about extra virgin olive oil. I mean, we didn't, the only thing we used olive oil for was to clear the wax from our ears. You could get it from a pharmacy, but nothing else. And I think it's difficult for us sometimes to understand just how embedded, how deeply rooted it is in those kind of cultures, and also how much, from a practical perspective, actually people in the Mediterranean consume. Because as we say in the book, 3 to 5 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil a day. It's the majority fat. It's a ubiquitous ingredient. I mean, there is no ingredient that actually counts for as much in any single diet as extra virgin olive oil does in the Mediterranean diet.
You said 3 to 5 tablespoons a day. Is that sort of what you should take to keep the doctor away, like they say with an apple? Like literally you could just consume it that way? I mean, or just incorporate it into whatever you're doing?
Incorporate it, and as Amy says, if you're using it throughout the day to dress, to cook, you'll inevitably get through that kind of amount. And in a balanced diet with other healthy ingredients, there's no worry that it will increase your weight, because the Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil in that quantity doesn't increase people's weight. There's really good evidence for that. So don't focus just on the calories. Add it to, because when you add olive oil to pasta, it actually decreases the sugar rise of the pasta, decreases the glycemic load, which we know is important in terms of people putting on weight, more important probably than calories. So extra virgin olive oil, ubiquitous. And as I say, I think for many of us who live outside the Mediterranean, it's quite difficult for us to really conceive that actually we can consume that amount of extra virgin olive oil, but we can, and we should, and enjoy it.
You talk about calories. I like to say there are no fat Italians. I don't see them. They weren't in my family. They're not when I go to Italy. I see plenty of them in America, and it says an awful lot about the way we've consumed our food. And that's got to change very quickly, because we are on a really, really a very slippery slope. And then people are taking, medicines to combat that. And I think, gosh, if I have to take off a few pounds, I'm going to do it the way I should be doing it, not by adding more stuff into my body. People, please. Do you agree with that?
You think of
Absolutely. I mean, I think calories have quite limited value, to be honest. I mean, you only have to look at a soda, which is 0 calorie. Actually, there is now some really convincing evidence that that is even more likely to make you put on weight
Of course.
because of the effects of those artificial sweeteners on your gut microbiome than actually, even if it's a full count, if it's a full strength soda. Of course, the answer is not to actually have that kind of added sugar or indeed the sweetener, but just to rely on the sweetness of natural foods, a little bit of honey, but always with this Mediterranean diet with lots of extra virgin olive oil.
Amy, do you want to add to that? And I have to say this, as you're sitting there sort of waiting, to speak, and I got the feeling you had something to add. You just look so lovely there in your red and so festive. And I want to make sure that I mention that in my show because you really just, it's just really lovely.
Thank you. Well, I dressed up for you. I love these episodes, and I think you're
Yeah,
fantastic. I'm honored to be here. So,
yeah.
and speaking about the Italian culture and the difference between the Italian culture in Italy and here, since I spend a lot of time in both places, I see this first and foremost. And we're able to get a lot of the same foods here now, but it's harder to incorporate it into the lifestyle. I don't, food is one part of it, and what we consume physically is one part, but a lot of it is psychology, and a lot of it is culture. And it's easier in Italy because the culture and the lifestyle still, even though they're modern and even though they have all the same conveniences that we do, but the culture still backs up a more healthful lifestyle, whereas we don't in America. And so it's before anybody decides, well, I'm going to eat less of this and eat more of this, I think to buy in, there is this real cultural piece of whether you're Italian or not. If you're Italian, you can say, I'm going to get back to my roots and I'm going to do things this way. If you're not Italian, you can say, we realize that this has been voted the #1 diet in the world for, X amount of years. But really, to think about like the quality of food, where it comes from, to appreciate it from that standpoint, and to say to some people, a lot of people really want to nickel and dime culinary ingredients, but yet they spend a lot of money in other places. When you go to the mechanic and they want to change the oil in your car, they're going to show you what the filter of your car or the air filter will look like with cheap oil and what the air
Mm.
filter looks like with good oil. But we don't do that in America from what we put into our body. And so it's like it costs more. It might cost a little bit more, but it saves you more years. It saves you more time. It saves you from getting sick. And so I think that's the first thing. And then to really look at the romance behind it. When you think I can use these same things that my ancestors were using and that people have been using to live longer and better for a long amount of time. Maybe this recipe ties into a cultural festival or some part of our heritage. Lentils, I'll take for an example, everybody, lentils, like big deal. Celery, big deal. Well, lentils used to be money. They didn't just look like money
Oh,
because look like money, and so we use them. The Italians eat them on New Year's Eve. They actually were currency in the ancient world. A lot of beans were currency. So how can you call that cucina povera or poor man's food when they were actually currency? The Egyptian Empire, one of the reasons it became the Egyptian Empire was because it was the main exporter of lentils in the Mediterranean. So, we can look at lentils that way and make them all of a sudden, elegant again. Celery. If you look at any White House menu here in America from 100 years ago, there was a separate celery course. We had courses and plates, porcelain plates, just for serving celery because they only came
wow.
from Europe. They were like truffles. Celery is wonderful for lowering blood pressure, which is a global problem, and people don't think about celery, like, oh, celery is this, or we use it at base, but we don't really celebrate celery. So we have to get excited about these different ingredients from like where they were, what we can do with them, and I think start with that. With that, we're excited. You don't have to give up anything in the Mediterranean diet. We can still have our pastries on Sunday and a decent amount serving of pasta every day, but everything else that goes around it is a choice. And I think get excited about that choice, because over here we have a lot of marketing dollars that are going into fast food. There's a lot of marketing dollars going into eating big steaks every day, and so we have to kind of like quiet all of that down with our own excitement and our own passion about the Mediterranean and about our own health.
Look, our lifestyle is grab it to go, put it in your car, consume it on your way to somewhere because you're rushing to that place. I've been there myself, particularly with my work. There's always a deadline, and that's not healthy. It's not sustainable. we can't keep living that way. And then you mentioned celery, and I'm thinking, ooh, I have to get behind celery. It's not my favorite, but I do know that you need to write a book on celery, celery for dummies, because I look at it and I know it's good for me, and it's just hard for me to eat. Like those little long strands always somehow get stuck, or I feel like I'm going to choke on it. But I need to get behind it because I've also read that it's a very, very healthy food for us, right?
So there's a fun
So
Italian
can I come
salad.
back on?
Yes, I'm going to give one recipe, Simon, and then I'll let you have the floor. Very fun Italian salad with celery that my importer Stefano Ferrari makes at his restaurants, and it will convert anybody. So you just finely dice, or you can put the celery in a food processor if you don't want to do it yourself. But finely dice the celery, put some natural dried cranberries and some chopped
Ooh,
fresh walnuts and a little
ooh.
bit of gorgonzola cheese, good quality extra virgin olive oil, good quality balsamic, and stir it, and you'll love it. It'll be like your go-to salad.
Okay, I love this. I'm going to do it because it's easy. If it's easy,
Yeah.
I'll make it. And that sounds easy and it sounds really good. Simon, please go ahead. And we don't have all that much time, so I only have a couple more questions after that. Please go.
So I'll be very quick. I mean, I think what Amy is describing so eloquently is how you can put the Mediterranean diet together, even with the most expensive item that you're probably going to buy, which is extra virgin olive oil. So I think instead of, people may be thinking, oh gosh, 3 to 5 tablespoons, that's a lot of oil. It's quite expensive. And particularly in recent years, it has increased in price. And I completely understand that. But I think we need to get away from thinking about cooking oil as being the cheapest thing in our supermarket trolley to being the most expensive thing, actually, one of the most expensive items, one of the items that we truly value. And, there's a
Mm,
great researcher into the Mediterranean diet. She's from Greece, and she says to me, Simon, the reason why the Greeks consume 3 times as many vegetables as people do in the UK is because they have it with olive oil. And that's what makes things like celery really palatable and really beautiful. And the science is actually supportive of the fact that a Mediterranean diet with plenty of extra virgin olive oil can be cheaper than a Western convenience diet. So less than $1 a day for a really good quality extra virgin olive oil, which is much less than 2 of your coffees from your favorite coffee house per week, can supply you with a really good quality extra virgin olive oil. So to some extent, it's about making that shift in priority and that shift in appreciation of which particular ingredients are really, really crucial and important to pay good money for.
mm. My next question is, I have three questions left. One will be, I'm going to start with this one. Can you substitute olive oil for any recipe where it calls for corn oil, which I won't use, or vegetable oil, which I won't use? Can you just substitute? As soon as you see the word oil in there, can you go, oh, I'm going with the olive oil? That's a yes or no question?
For me, the answer is yes. And I will tell you a little bit about why people think it's no. Some people, say making like a vanilla chiffon cake for somebody's birthday. Some people
Yeah.
might say,
Oh,
I don't want a strong, olive oil flavor in that, so I'm going to use corn or vegetable oil. If, God forbid, you have to use those oils, use expeller pressed versions of those oils that are healthier than the other ones. But I personally use extra virgin olive oil. So in the book, we talk a lot about how to pair extra virgin olive oil and different things. Use
yeah.
a more delicate flavored extra virgin olive oil if you don't want that olive flavor. I love the olive flavor, so I try to pair it with what it pairs best with in food and bring the best out. But I use it in banana bread, I use it in cakes, I use it in cookies, and it's just a matter of finding the right one that goes in. And I think once people get used to it, they will like it even more than the other recipes without it.
I just did it with my pumpkin pie and my pumpkin breads for Thanksgiving. I'm telling you, they were the best I've ever made. So there. Okay, next one. Is there a particular brand that you recommend that people buy, or do you stay away from recommending brands?
Well, in the
Shall I come
book,
back on that?
sure.
Is that okay? So I think one's got to recognize that there are different markets in extra virgin olive
Right.
oil. So there are some extra virgin olive oils that are really packaged and they are blends of extra virgin olive oils from all over, for example, the Mediterranean. And they come basically, it's a sort of wholesale commodity price. It might be packaged in Italy, but it's not necessarily a product of Italy. It's a product of many countries. And they kind of scoop around at the end of the harvest looking for the quality of oil is probably only just past the extra virgin grade. So it's probably not going to be very rich in these polyphenol compounds. So what I would suggest to people is that really I would try and go for something even better than that. Go for an extra virgin olive oil and look for something on the shelf that really is talking to you, a label that's trying to communicate the passion of the grower, the region where it comes from, maybe even talking about the variety of olives that they use, sort of so that actually it's communicating something about provenance, around authenticity. And these days, sometimes even people are quantifying the number of polyphenols, these anti-inflammatory compounds, although one's got to be a bit cautious about that because they tend to decline over a period of months. So that's in its early stages. But really, it's to look for those kind of the passion of the producer, regional, and you can buy a great oil from anywhere in the world that produces extra virgin olive oil, just as you can buy a very poor one. And I think look on the bottle to see whether you can recognize some of those things that are crying out to you and saying, buy me because my producer is passionate and because it's great quality.
That's actually very well said. Finally, some of the uses for olive oil. We already know cooking and consuming in that way. I'm just going to tell you what I use it for. Some very non-traditional ways. I will actually put it on a rag and I will put it on my furniture instead of any kind of polish. I don't even know if that's something I should be doing, but I do it and I put it on my natural wood. Somebody said to me, "Oh my gosh, you're going to attract ants." I've never had an ant doing that ever. So I use it for that. My front door was drying out from all the sunlight. It's also a solid wood door. I use my olive oil on that. Sorry, people, it might sound crazy, but I did. It looks beautiful. I use it for my hair. I use it for my skin all the time. And I'm somebody who has done pretty much nothing. And I think it's because of the olive oil that I will put on my skin. Amy, I'm going to address that to you. Are those all good uses? Okay, there you go. There's my answer. Go ahead.
I think it's sad that we live in a world that if we use a million chemicals that we don't know anything about around us, people don't think twice of it. But if we use something natural, they think we're crazy. Like that's what bothers me. In the book, we give a lot of beauty things. So shaving, olive oil gives a wonderful shaving cream because it's very smooth and it won't leave your skin itchy afterwards. It also has that nice calming anti-inflammatory effect. You can also use it in your hair as you do, as like a glossing and finishing. You can use it as a mask, like as a facial mask. Sophia Loren talks about how she uses it as a moisturizer. In the book, we also have some recipes that were translated from hieroglyphs that are said to be ones that Cleopatra uses, because my second book was actually called Nile Style Egyptian Cuisine and Culture, and I spent about 10 years researching ancient Egyptian things with Egyptologists, archaeologists, things. So we have some access to some of that information. We have some poetry and lore written by the Roman poet Ovid, where he talks about different characters in his book moisturizing their skin and glossing their skin with extra virgin olive oil. So there are a lot of other places that you can use it too.
Anything else you'd like to add to our conversation before I let you go? Also, where they can purchase the book and can they get it in time for the holidays, please?
Yes, so they can get the book anywhere pretty much that it's available on Amazon. In the United States, they can also get it on my website, which is amyriolo.com. And whoever purchases the book gets a $10 coupon for future purchases. And they also get entered into a raffle to win a bottle of my extra virgin olive oil.
That I want to purchase. And that's on your website too, right? The bottle of extra virgin olive oil. That looked terrific because you held it up earlier. I thought, oh, I have to get myself some of that. Simon, any parting words that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, just really sharing Amy's comments, really, that we've tried in Olive Oil for Dummies to make a comprehensive guide, because we know that olive oil there's a real buzz around extra virgin olive oil at the moment. There are people talking about it, even people talking about polyphenols. There are lots of people talking about it on social media and so on. And so we really wanted to get out there with a guide which really would take people through the steps to making the kind of choice about extra virgin olive oil and how to use it and what to buy and so on. So we hope that it's a really, really helpful and practical guide. And some of my friends who know a lot about olive oil have read it and said, wow, we've learned something. And indeed, in writing it, both from each other, but also through looking at other sources, we've learned a great deal, even more about olive oil. So yes, we hope that people can benefit from it. And what better present really to give somebody that from an ingredient that can decrease people's risk of having heart attacks and strokes and diabetes
Mm.
and so on. What a great gift, we hope.
Yeah, it certainly is. This book really excited me because I have a passion for olive oil. So thank you for sending it to me, by the way. And I'm just thrilled. It has a place in my kitchen with some of your other books too. I just want you to know that I really enjoy these books. They're very comprehensive, very well done, and they're easy. They're for anybody who, just is looking for more information. So thank you both so much. It's been a delight to have you. And please, everybody, find my conversation with Amy Riolo and Dr. Simon Poole on Deborah Cobelt Live and my Little Italy podcast, and also Little Italy of LA podcast. Look them up. It's also as an audio version, our podcast, so you can download it wherever you get your podcast. Just put in our names, and you'll find the audio version. And then on video, of course, it's on YouTube, Facebook, promos on our Instagram, just about anywhere you'll find this conversation. So please invite your friends. Please pick up the book. It's really a terrific read, easy to read for the holidays. And tell your friends about it. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Deborah Zara Cobell. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.